Start with prayer, and prayer is always a Chumash song. So everybody say Yamakwide.
Yamakwide.
That's what we're going to start with. So you get to sing with me. Ready? Yamakwide. Yamakwide way. Yamakwide. Hey, Yamakwide way. Yamakwide way. Yamakwide way. Yamakwide way. Yamakwide way. Yamakwide! Yamakwide. Yamakwide way. Yamakwide. Yamakwide way. Yamakwide way. Yamakwide way. Yamakwide way. Yamakwide way. You say. Oh, no. Yamakwide. Yeah. All right. So Yamakwide is the burrowing owl. Have you ever seen a burrowing owl? They're about this big. They live in the desert,
And
they burrow into the ground. So they're one of the few birds that lives under the ground. And then it comes out at night and it flies around. And so it lives in three worlds: under the ground, on the ground, and in the air. So Yamakwide is a sacred animal. You can't live in three worlds like that. And Yamakwide protects us at night. It flies around and with its sharp eyesight protects us from things that might harm us. So Yamakwide is the healing bird, the bird of the healers. And so Cecilia Garcia is a healer, and she's taught me since 1998. She started teaching me, and she and I have written a book together called Healing with Medicinal Plants of the West. If you want to buy the book, I have it in my car down in the parking lot. And I'd like to recognize my pharmacy students. Raise your hand if you're a pharmacy student. 4 pharmacy students. Thank you for coming today, ladies. So these are USC pharmacy students who are with us today. And if you have any questions about your drugs, oh, come on. You can ask me. And if I have questions, I'll ask them. Okay, so we're standing under this oak tree here, and this is one of the oak trees that was saved from the fire, and it was saved by, Mark, what was his name?
Bob McFall.
Bob McFall, and so that's why it's now called the McFall Oak. And there's a plaque right there that some of you can probably see. So what kind of oak tree is this? Coast live oak. What's the scientific name? Quercus agrifolia. Now the way you identify this tree is you take the leaf and you turn it upside down and you realize that it forms a cup. And that's how, this is the only oak tree that has a leaf like this. So this is coast live oak. And what do we get from oak trees? Acorns. How many of you have eaten acorns?
After your hike, I went and made some gingerbread with acorn flour.
Oh, good for you.
That's awesome.
So acorns are the #1 food plant of the Chumash in the old days. Most of the Chumash I know today don't like acorns, which in Chumash is called we wish, but anyway. So what you do is you take 40 acorns, you chop them in half, you put them into your blender, you put in a tablespoon of baking powder or baking soda. Fill it half full of water. You blend it for several minutes until the acorns are really ground up. You let it settle. You pour off the water. Put in more water. Blend it, settle, pour off the water. More water, blend, settle, pour off the water. So 3 washes. The first one with baking soda or baking powder. Then you take those acorns, put them in your microwave for about 5 minutes until they turn a dark chocolate brown, like bittersweet chocolate, like this lady's sweatshirt here, maybe even darker than that. And that's when you eat them, and they taste so good. I really like acorns. Now, if you're not willing to go to that kind of work, it takes about an hour to prepare acorns like that, and 40 acorns is what one person will eat. If you're not willing to go to that kind of effort, go down to the corner of Foothill and Pennsylvania. You'll find a little Korean grocery store in there. You go into that Korean grocery store and you buy some acorn powder, and you take it home and you cook it. Koreans eat acorns. We don't. Why don't Americans eat acorns? Trouble. A lot of Americans have been taught that they're toxic, and they are not. The biggest mistake that people make when they're gathering acorns, they pick them off the tree. Never, ever pick acorns off the tree. They're not ripe. They're not ready for you to eat. You wait until they fall on the ground. You pick them up off the ground. Then you eat them. And if you cut it open and you find a grub in there, a weevil grub, that's the best acorn. You keep that one.
Extra protein.
Bugs know which are the best acorns. See? This woman was taught that acorns are toxic.
The tannins are toxic.
The tannins,
That's why you process.
you know, I've never known any human being who can eat enough tannin to get toxic from it because it's so bitter. Cows can, on the other hand. Now, cows will eat the leaves of oak trees and they can develop liver damage because of that. Cows are not very smart animals. That's why I'm so glad that I'm vegetarian. I didn't say that. This woman said, "You are what you eat." I did not say that. Are there any questions about acorns? Yes.
Does it matter, since there's such a variety of oak trees, does it matter what type of oak tree you get your acorns
You
from?
bet it does. Some oak trees taste a lot better than others. My favorite is the blue oak, which you can't find down here much. It's more up in the San Francisco area. The other one that's good is the valley oak. And those are two oak trees that if you know how to find them, they are here in Southern California. They're not easy to find. This one is more bitter than the other oak trees, but it's still a good acorn. And I see Korean people up here all the time gathering acorns. And by the way, you are allowed to collect acorns and fruit in any, nuts and fruit in any park, anytime without a permit. Is that correct, Mark?
I actually don't know.
Okay, that's the National Park Service rule. That you are allowed to to gather nuts and fruit at any time, any place without a permit. You cannot collect plants. That's the difference. Okay? Any other questions about acorns? Yes?
What kind of nutrition do you get from them?
Oh, acorns are amazing because acorns are very high in carbohydrate. They're about 30% of their calories from carbohydrate, which is very different from any other nut. Most nuts are about 50% fat, 50% protein. But acorns are 30% carbohydrate, 50% fat, and the remainder protein. What is that, 20%? So acorns are very unusual compared to other nuts. And I like the flavor of acorns. I eat them all the time. And I'm going to feed them to my pharmacy students when we go to one of our hikes. This canyon here, and I'm talking about prior to 1890, this canyon here was not chaparral like you see today. In the old days, it was a forest of this tree right here. This is big Cone Douglas Fir, Pseudotsuga macrocarpa. Those of you from Oregon, it's not the same Douglas Fir from Oregon. The cones are bigger. And this is a drought-resistant plant. In the old days, this whole canyon was a dense Douglas Fir forest. And every canyon in these mountains, they were all Douglas Fir forests. But people in Los Angeles needed wood to cook by. And so they came up here to cut all the Douglas Fir out, and they hired Cantonese people to come in here and cut out the trees. So by 1890, all of the Douglas Fir were gone. 1890. And, everybody said, "Oh, don't worry, they'll grow back. They'll come back. Don't worry." Douglas Fir isn't like that. If you clear cut Douglas Fir, it doesn't come back. And even if you go to Oregon, I'm from Oregon. If you go to Oregon, they're replanting all their Douglas Fir too. Well, let's not talk about the Medford area. That's a disaster. But anyway, so now these big Cone Douglas Fir are being replanted here in this park. And thank you, Mark, so much for doing that. Do you want to talk about it?
I can say that it's part of our restoration program that we implemented after the park opened again 9 months after the station fire. And we do have this third Saturday Wilderness Work Day. Part of what we've done is plant the big Cone Douglas Fir. in hopes that one day, if we live long enough, we can have a nice shaded forest area up here. Most of the park we've left to its own devices. We're letting Mother Nature take her own course and bringing back the park, with the exception that we do go in and try to remove as much non-native invasive species as we can. So if you're interested in this kind of thing, I'd love to have you come out and join us every third Saturday. The next time we'll be out is April 21st. And as I think I mentioned, we'll also be having a hike that day as well. It'll be a wildflower hike with our restoration ecologist, Melanie Keeler, who works for the National Park Service.
All right. Excellent.
Yeah, Melanie's a great person. So I've actually planted several of these big Cone Douglas firs, like that one over there with the yellow flag. I planted that one, and I planted several others down over in there. So I had a great time. Thank you, Mark. Now, it's such a great thing that we're here today because you see how these Douglas fir trees survive. If you look at the needles of this Douglas fir tree, it's covered with little water droplets. All the fog is condensing onto these needles, and it falls to the ground, so it's watering itself by condensing the fog. So this is a drip forest tree. These trees used to exist here as a drip forest. So they can survive here with a lot less rain than they get in Oregon. And I'm from Newport, Oregon, where it rains 440 inches a year. 440 inches a year. I said that correctly. 440 inches
Can you
a
give
year.
us some?
So one of the things about this park is that it is so full of medicinal plants that we can't go very far without stopping to talk. And I had a question earlier from the Austrian guy.
Yeah.
There you are. Wondered where you went.
Yeah, right in front of you.
Asking you about this plant here. What is this plant?
Sagebrush.
California sagebrush,
Artemisia
Artemisia californica. It's also called coastal sagebrush. If you want to grow it, you can go down to the Theodore Payne Foundation, which is about 5 miles that way on Tuxford in Sun Valley. You can buy this plant and you can grow it in your yard. Now, I've stopped here at this place because you see this plant right here? It looks a lot like sagebrush, doesn't it? It's not. This is Ericameria pinifolia, and you see it has these not very pretty yellow flowers on it. Can you see those yellow flowers? But it has the wire-shaped leaves like sagebrush. The way you tell them apart is you smell the plant. Let me teach you how you smell a plant. You pick a few leaves, you rub them in your fingers, and you smell your fingers. Tastes kind of like pine. Smells like pine. Now let's smell the sagebrush. Take a couple leaves, roll them in your fingers. Oh, yeah. That's sagebrush. So as we walk up the trail today, I want all of you to do that. Just take a few leaves, roll them in your fingers. Oh, get to know this plant. Absolutely. Now, the reason that this plant is so important is because the smell of this plant stimulates pleasant memories. So I had to move away from California after I got my PhD, and I moved to, I don't want to tell you where I moved. And when I came back, this is the plant that told me that I was home. I love this plant. Pleasant memories. The other thing that it's used for, so what you do is you grow the plant in your yard, and then you take a whole bunch of the leaves and stems, and you stuff them in a little sack about the size of your fist, and you keep it in your car, and you squeeze it whenever you're feeling a little bit anxious. The traffic is just going crazy today, and you squeeze that thing and smell it. Oh yeah, it'll calm you right down.
It should make padding steering wheels.
Padded steering. It might make it hard to steer, but that's a good idea. So the other thing it's used for is that it is a very powerful pain reliever. Much more powerful than morphine. Yes, I did say that it's more powerful than morphine. More powerful than the fentanyl patch, pharmacy students. So what you do is you take a whole bunch of this plant that you grow in your own yard, like this much, that much of the plant. The stems, the leaves, so like 100 grams, this much. And you stuff it in a big jug. about 4 liters. Stuff it in there, and you fill it with rubbing alcohol. I use rubbing alcohol. Cecilia Garcia uses tequila.
I used vodka.
Vodka. All right. Okay.
That's expensive.
You know, I don't encourage you to use drinkable alcohol because people might think they can drink it, and you don't drink this stuff. You would die if you drank it. All right. So you stuff it in there. You put in. She likes avocado seeds, Cecilia Garcia. So she'll use as many as 6 to 12 avocado seeds that you just cut them in half and put them in there, and then 1 leaf of white sage, and we'll see white sage as we go up. Salvia apiana. And you leave it in the dark for about 3 to 6 weeks. And that's when it's ready to use. And you use it as a tincture. You just rub it on. Mark, did you try that tincture I gave you?
Yeah.
Did it work? Yeah. All right. See, Mark likes it. I made some for him and gave him some. You rub it where it hurts. You just take a little cotton ball. You rub it where it hurts. Okay? And within like 10 to 20 minutes, your pain will either be gone or mostly gone. Your pain will go from 10 to 3 or 10 to 0. It really is dramatic. And this is a plant that we really desperately must learn to use from the Chumash people, because now we're killing ourselves with Vicodin, OxyContin, fentanyl patch. Did you know that 10,000 people a year are dying of those medicines in this country? And I'm not talking about heroin abusers on the street of LA. I'm talking about somebody's grandmother in Fresno who's got the fentanyl patch and she's taking oxycodone and she dies of an overdose. We should be using this plant. Absolutely. It's not addictive, much safer.
Does
Now,
that have artemisinin in it?
It is Artemisia.
So
It's our, oh,
but it's related to the absinthe plant, isn't it?
it has
different than
fujone
wormwood.
in it, just
Oh,
like
fujo, okay,
just
yeah.
like
Wormwood.
just like wormwood, just like the absinthe plant. But the difference is you're not drinking it; you're rubbing it on.
Is that the active ingredient you're talking
No.
about? That's a painkiller?
Well,
though?
the active ingredients are cineol, camphor, camphene, borneol. There are 15 of them, and I'm the world expert on what's in this plant. There is some thujone in there, but not a lot.
Yeah.
And so when you're rubbing it on, you're only using a little bit where you need it, and you're not suffering any toxicity. Question.
I was going to say, what was the lethal dose or toxic dose of the plant? Probably a point where you had to be breathing.
You'd have to be drinking it. Yeah.
Do you drain it or do you leave all the leaves?
You leave everything in there, and you just
Forever.
use the liquid.
Okay.
Yeah, forever.
Okay.
Question.
Are you talking also like about joint pain, muscle pain, any kind of thing?
You know, my wife broke her left knee. She took 2 Vicodin. It did 0 for her. Her pain was 10 after 2 Vicodin. And so I said, honey, are you willing to try this Chumash remedy? She was howling in pain. And so I rubbed it on her knee very carefully. And within 10 minutes, her pain went from 10 to 3. Broken knee. Now, we had a woman, a 75-year-old woman with hepatic cancer that had metastasized all throughout her whole chest area. Severe pain. She had 2 fentanyl patches, 1 on each hip, still howling in pain. We rubbed it all over her chest, and her pain went from 10 to 3.
I have a question.
Question.
Is this more potent than white willow bark?
Much more potent than white willow, and white willow is dangerous because it contains salicylates. You don't want to be using high doses of salicylates because they cause ulcers.
Okay.
Pharmacy students, how much do we pay a year for ulcers from NSAIDs? Millions. It's a very expensive thing. This is much safer than all those aspirin and ibuprofen and all that. Much safer. Safer than Tylenol.
So are you still activating the mu receptors?
No, these are activating the transient receptor potential cation channels, TRP channels, just like capsaicin. Just like capsaicin. The difference is, now capsaicin only interacts with one channel. This is interacting with 4 different channels, so you get much higher pain relief than capsaicin. Question?
Could you use water instead of rubbing alcohol?
No, has to be alcohol. In the old days, the Chumash people were using bear fat, whale fat, seal fat, because they didn't have distilled alcohol. Other questions? Yeah.
I know we're talking medicinal uses, but is it not the same sage we use for spices for cooking?
No, no, sir.
Different
No,
sage.
no. This is sage brush, not sage.
Thank you.
Other questions? If you cook with this, you will be so sorry. This is pseudo. Used to be Nephtalium californicum. Now it's pseudo Nephtalium californicum.
Why?
That's what scientists do for a living. That's all I can say.
I don't think Theodore Payne sells this.
No.
So how do you get it in your garden?
You wait until you get the seeds, and you just plant those seeds. As I said, you can collect seeds and nuts and fruits.
But it's not now.
Yeah, you have to wait a little bit longer. This is probably, it might have some seeds in this part up here.
Just to be clear, you can collect seeds, fruit, nuts,
And nuts.
but not leaves.
Not leaves, that's correct. Not leaves, not flowers, not plants. Okay, so I stopped
Red
here
sage.
because this plant right here is waving at you, saying, hello, don't pass me. Don't you know what I am?
Yes.
Who knows what it is?
White sage, sure.
White sage, Salvia apiana. Now, salvia means salvation. Apiana means light colored. So Martin Luther, when he was writing his letters to the Pope, one of the things that he said is, why would I ever worry when I have salvation growing in my garden? Salvia. So those of you who think of scientists as these godless people, please don't do that. I'm not an atheist. Okay? Now, you see the leaves are sort of grayish white. And the reason that it's called white sage is because if you come back here next week, well, maybe it's too late. Anyway, the flowers are white, and the flowers are up here. I grow this in my garden. I bought it at the Rancho Santa Ana Botanic Garden over in Claremont and grow it in my garden. You can buy it at Theodore Payne and grow it in your garden. Theodore Payne is such a treasure. What a great
And their
place.
plant sale is on April the 21st.
April
No,
the 21st.
They have a sale going on right now.
Is it? No, it's today, is it?
Yes.
And
Yes. It's their
plant
puppy
sale
day
today.
sale.
Right after.
Oh, they're right after.
That's what we're doing.
Well, it's fresh in your mind what plants you have to have. And they'll be sold out. But anyway. So, Cecilia Garcia, I'm going to use the exact word she uses. This plant is our everything. We must have it every day. So what I do, is I take a leaf from my plant that I grow in my garden, and I put it in my water bottle. One leaf, one water bottle. And I drink from that water bottle all day long. Refill the water bottle, keep the leaf. The next day I get a new water bottle, new leaf. Okay? And this plant helps purify our central nervous system. It helps us to be rational and calm and function in society. So that's the number one use for this plant. Now, if you're really sick, like you have just been diagnosed with cancer, or you just broke your hip, you have pneumonia, very sick, you may make a tea from this plant. You use one leaf, you put it in a mug of water, big mug of water, and you heat it up until the water starts to boil, then you stop it. And then you drink that. No sugar, nothing else. You can add cinnamon, but it's a very mild tea, sort of like a Chinese tea. Very mild. Those of you who are English, it's not one of those black, ugly, bitter, horrible English teas.
I could use one right now.
So you only drink this as a tea if you're very sick, but the rest of the time you're drinking it in your water to help you be rational and calm and function in society. Okay, and this is also the plant. Remember when we were making the liniment down the trail, the sagebrush liniment? You take one of these leaves, you put it in your liniment. And white sage is in every Chumash medicine. You put one leaf in every Chumash medicine because it enhances every medicine that you make. That's how important this plant is. The flowers are also good. You can eat the flowers and use them medicinally. The seeds are also good. Little black seeds that you can eat.
I've
Nice
heard
plant.
that they have high omegas, like the
Chia.
Chia.
Just like chia, it's high in the omega-3 fatty acids, linolenic acid, which is good for your heart. Okay.
That just works with the white sage, not with the other sages,
No,
which are locally
only
found.
white sage. Only white sage. In Spanish, it's called salvia real, which means royal sage. Question.
For those of us who can't keep up with the notes, is a lot of this in your book?
Hopefully most of it is in the book. The rest of it is at the website abeduspress.com, ABEDUSPRESS.com. Abedus is Latin for hidden.
You should look at the Wilderness Way articles in that. That was excellent, and I wish there were more.
There are Wilderness Way articles posted on that website that give you all kinds of recipes. And you can also go to Cecilia Garcia's website, which is chumashmedicinewoman.com. chumashmedicinewoman.com. And you can book a meeting with her and have a healing session or whatever you want to do. She has all kinds of activities. Now we have, this is this is not chia here, this is a pincushion. That's Chenoctis ambrosifolia, and that one's also Chenoctis ambrosifolia. This one right here is Chia. Okay, so Chia, like the Chia pet. No, the little blue flower right here. This is Chia. Why is Chia so important? Because it's used to wake the dead. So when I first started working with Cecilia Garcia, she didn't want to talk about this plant. I said, what do we use this plant for? I don't know. And so finally I got her to tell me, we use it to wake the dead. And she was expecting me to laugh at her and say, oh my God, what a crazy thing to say. And I said, wow, I work on stroke. This must work against stroke. Exactly what I was looking for. So Cecilia and I actually collected a bunch of this plant in Eaton Canyon with the permission of Mickey Long, the ranger there, who's now retired. Great guy. And we took it back to my lab, ground it up, found out what's in it, found a whole bunch of new compounds. And this is a plant that contains compounds called tanchinones. So we looked on the internet to find out what other plants contain tanchinones. There's a plant in China called dansun that contains tanchinones. Dansun is Salvia miltiorhiza. This is Salvia columbari. They're both annual sages. In China, the #1 treatment for stroke and heart attack is dansun. #1. Whenever you have a stroke in China, immediately they give you dansun. What happens when you have a stroke in this country?
They let you die.
You go to the emergency room and you sit there for 6 hours. After 6 hours, a neurologist will come and examine you because it takes 6 hours for your brain damage to become stable. So you sit there unattended for 6 hours. And then after 6 hours, the neurologist decides what to do with you. Either you're going to go home and be on your own, or you're going to go into a care unit, you know, if you have a lot of brain damage. Does that sound like a barbaric way to treat your grandmother? To me, it sounds barbaric. Really sounds barbaric. In China, they would never allow that. You get dansun immediately.
And what part is used? The whole plant?
Hang on. Now, you have to use this plant for about 6 months after your stroke. And you do it in conjunction with exercises. So you're doing exercises, you're taking this plant every day. For the first few weeks, you're taking it 3 times a day. And then after that, you decrease to once or twice a day. Now here in California, we use the seeds. And you can see the flowers here, and these 2 clusters are the seed clusters. If you come back in a couple weeks, those seed clusters will be full of little black seeds. That's what you use, those seeds. Yes?
Can I clarify, are we talking about the chia plant or are we talking about a different plant now?
We're talking about the chia plant.
Okay.
Now in China, they use the root of their plant, the root of dansun, Salvia miltiorhiza. But here, it's much easier. We use the seeds.
I just bought seeds at the market.
You can buy chia seeds. You can go to Herbs of Mexico on Whittier and East LA and buy the seeds for $12 a pound. That's what I do. I buy 5 pounds at a time. Now in Mexico, their chia is Salvia hispanica, different species, but we can use it the same way. And they have whole villages down there where their major cash crop is chia. And so by buying chia, you're actually supporting those little villages in Mexico. So it's a good thing. And we really desperately must learn how to use this plant, because what we're doing to our stroke patients, our grandparents, is just criminal, in my opinion. You know, when your grandfather has a stroke and his arm looks like this, what does the doctor tell him? Oh, you're going to be like that for the rest of your life. In China, they say, oh no, you'll be able to use your arm again. You may not ever regain full use of your arm, but you'll be able to use it again. Why can't we learn this? A tablespoon of the seeds, and you mix it with about a 1/4 cup of water, and you let it sit in that water until it becomes a gel. It swells up and it becomes a gel. And it's like drinking liquid Jello. Okay, and that's what you give your grandparents when they have a stroke. 3 times a day to start.
Elderberry?
California elderberry. In the old days, we called it Sambucus mexicana, but after December of 2011, that far ago, we now call it Sambucus nigra. Now this is, as you said, elderberry, and you can see this is an elderberry tree here. You see how the branches droop over like that? And you can, the leaves are called pinnate. Here's a leaf, and you can see it has a feather shape to it. That's what pinnate means, feather shape. So we don't have any flowers on it right now, but eventually, oh, there are a few flowers here, thank you. And eventually it's going to form these big umbels of flowers, and then those flowers will become berries. How many of you have eaten elderberries? Are they good?
They're great.
Oh, they're great. You go to Europe, and how much do you spend for elderberries? $15 a pound?
We don't take it from the backyard.
Yeah, if you go to France, you can buy elderberry wine, elderberry jam, elderberry pastries, you know.
Elderberry liquor.
Elderberry, yeah, elderberry liquor. And here in this country, you can't find elderberries to buy anywhere. Why is that? Does anyone know? We're taught that elderberry is poisonous.
No, but the syrup.
It used to be called Mexican elderberry. It's now called Sambucus nigra. Okay. Now, the Sambucus nigra is a plant that occurs all over the world. You find it in South America, North America, Europe, Asia, Africa. You don't find it in Australia. This plant was taken everywhere our ancestors went. They took it with them. That's how important this plant is. Here in this country, we think it's toxic and we don't eat it. But those idiots in France and Germany and Austria, they're eating it all the time. And that's why there's so few of them. They're all dying from elderberry poisoning. We Americans, we're so clever, aren't we? No, we're not. Chumash people eat this plant as much as they can get their hands on it. What you do is you take those berries and you dry them in the sun, you roll them and dry them carefully in the sun, and they are so sweet and so beautiful, so nice. Now you don't eat the leaves because they're poison. They have cyanide generating compounds in them. You don't eat the bark because that's poison. You don't eat the roots because that's poison. You can eat the flowers, you can eat the berries. And I have eaten the flowers and the berries of this very plant we're standing next to many times. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
Now, pharmacy students, what do we use Sambucus for? In your pharmacy, you're selling it right now. Sambucol. Sambucol. You go to the Rite Aid down here on Foothill, and you can buy Sambucol. How many of you have tried Sambucol?
No, I use a tea.
Did it work for you?
I think it's for cold and
colds
right?
and flus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it works real well.
Yeah.
You buy Sambucol, and the symptoms of your cold will only last 2 days, and they'll be gone. 2 days. The rest of you, you're putting up with what? A week or so of symptoms?
So do you make like a tea out of the flowers? Do you?
Now, if you want to do the authentic California Indian way, what you do is you collect the flowers, you dry them, and you keep them until you need them. You take a teaspoon of the flowers, you put them in a mug of water, heat it up until it starts to boil, stop it. You make this weak tea. Now, the flowers don't taste very good. In my opinion, I'm sorry, but you drink that tea. And if you keep drinking that tea for 4 days, your symptoms of your cold will only last 2 days. Okay?
And that's the same as the California Everlasting.
That's the same as the California Everlasting, which is this plant right here. Now, the California Everlasting is Pseudonephalium californicum. And if you rub your fingers on the leaves, you need to really get to learn this plant if you're going to use it. If you rub your fingers on the leaves, it smells like orange. Beautiful plant. You need to learn to use this plant. This is actually more abundant than elderberry, and it's actually more powerful than elderberry. So what you do...
that tea for when everybody in the family got the flu.
Did it work?
It did. Mine was the shortest flu out of the family.
So what you do is you take the flowers and you allow them to dry, and you use about this much in your hand, in this part of your hand, that much of the flowers, so that's like half a teaspoon of the flowers. Put it in a mug of water, you heat it up until it starts to boil, you stop it, you drink it. No sugar, nothing added, just that. And you drink that 4 nights in a row, and the symptoms of your flu or cold will be gone within 2 days. In my opinion, it's more powerful than the elderberry. They both work real well against colds and flus. The rest of you who don't believe it, go ahead and suffer from your colds and flus for 7 to 10 days. Have fun.
What can you use the orange leafy thing for? Wasn't she saying that was women's tobacco?
Oh, thank you. It's called women's tobacco, and women use it the way they would use tobacco to help lose weight. So you use these, you take a couple of these leaves, put it in a mug of water, heat it until it starts to boil, stop it, drink that, and drink that 4 nights in a row to help curb your appetite, help you lose weight. It's a moderate, very moderate way to curb your appetite. So women use this a lot for that. Yes?
What's the name of that plant?
This is California Everlasting. Scientific name is Pseudonephalium californicum. Yes?
How can you detect cyanide in a plant? Does it smell like anything?
Yes. So what you do with the leaf, if you really want to smell the cyanide in this plant, you take the leaf and you chew it. And if you keep chewing it, not this time, but sometimes you'll start to smell the cyanide in your nose, at which point you spit it out. Because these leaves are toxic. Okay?
So does it smell like almonds maybe? Or?
Yeah, it has kind of an almond-like smell. Some people cannot smell cyanide at all. It's a genetic thing. Some people are very sensitive to cyanide. Some people can't smell it at all.
I have one more question. Are there any medicinal properties as for like the berries for the eyes?
For the eyes. The Chumash people, not the berries, but the flowers.
Okay.
The flowers you can make an eye wash from, provided that you boil it and you filter it to sterilize it.
Okay.
You have to be careful with it.
California Everlasting, do you use the flower or the leaves?
The flower is for flus and colds. The leaves are for appetite suppression. If you want to lose weight, 4 nights in a row. Then a few nights off and then back on. You all recognize it, right?
Yacca.
Yacca. In the old days, we called it Yacca whipplei. After December 2011, now we call it Hespero Yacca whipplei. And this is the seed stem, the flower stem of Hespero Yacca whipplei. You can see all the seeds up there. What's the common name of, other than Yacca?
Our Lord's Candle.
Our Lord's Candle. Anything else?
Spanish bayonet.
Spanish bayonet. That's the one I like. Now, the reason it's called Spanish bayonet is because Father Junipero Serra, who started the California mission system, the first mission was San Diego, and the Indians in San Diego were unhappy with the way they were being treated, so they left the mission, and the Catholic priests sent the Spanish soldiers after the Indians to bring them back against their will. And the California Indians hid in pits in the ground and behind bushes with this thing, these lances, and as the Spanish soldiers rode up on their horses with their guns, the unarmed Indians used those lances to knock them off their horses, and the unarmed Indians defeated the Spanish soldiers that way. So you may think that the Indians always lost their battles, but that is completely untrue. They won most of their battles. And you can read a book that I wrote about it called Stanislaw, Warrior Man of God. But that's why it's called Spanish bayonet, and that's why I will always call it Spanish bayonet. So this plant is very useful because you notice that it has a point on it. And if you cut this flower off down, the leaf down at the stem, and you take some smooth rocks and you start to pound it and grind it with water, you separate out the fibers in here. And you'll end up, if you're careful, you'll end up with a big, long bunch of fibers with a needle on the end. What can we use that for?
Sewing?
Sewing. Those of you who are into healthcare, a bear rips your arm open, you use that to sew the arm back up. I don't recommend poking bears because you're going to lose that battle. So it's very useful for tying on casts, for tying on poultices, for tying on bandages. So fiber is very important medicinally. The other thing is that when this flower stalk is about this tall, you cut the whole plant up out of the ground and you trim all the leaves off, and you end up with this big funny looking pineapple. You bake it in a stone oven under the ground for 3 days, and you eat it, and it has such a beautiful, wonderful, mild potato flavor. Life cycle.
This also has a use for soap.
Soap, thank you. It's also very useful for soap, and you can buy shampoos that contain Yacca saponins in them. And if the Spanish had listened to the Indians, they could have learned how to make soap from this plant, which is so much better than the sopa de Castilla that's made from cow fat. So that was the #1 industry here in California. The Spanish missions were making soap to sell to Spain, soap and candles. And the Spanish priests did not learn from the Indians how to make soap from this plant. Talk about 2 of them, but I'll mention this one back here first. This is California Bay. And we're going to talk about it more extensively when we get up to the very end of this hike. And the reason I'm pointing it out now is because you can see what the fire did to that plant. Man, it went up like a bomb. California Bay burns like the dickens, but you can see it's coming back. So don't cut it out. Don't give up on it. It's coming back. Now, we're going to talk about this plant right here, which several people have already identified, Yerba Santa. This is Areodictium crassifolium. This is the fuzzy-leafed Yerba Santa. And Deukmejian Park is one of the most abundant places to find Yerba Santa. This fuzzy-leafed Yerba Santa. Now, in the old days, if you went down to Briggs Avenue over there about 2 miles that way, the very top of Briggs Avenue here in La Crescenta, Dr. Briggs had his tuberculosis clinic there. And Dr. Briggs used this plant to treat tuberculosis. He had learned from the Indians how to use this plant for the treatment of tuberculosis. So that should tell you right away, this plant is used for respiratory problems. Pneumonia, asthma, tuberculosis, anything in the lungs, bronchitis, anything in your lungs. So what you do is you take, since Mark has given me permission to do this today, I'll show you. Now listen. Did you hear the snap? That tells you it's ready to go. You take about this much of the plant, you put it in a 2-quart pan of water, and you boil it. This is one of the few things that Cecilia and I will tell you to boil. You boil it until it fills the whole house with the smell of this plant. And then you vaporize over it. You stick your head over this plant, get a towel or whatever to help you really vaporize thoroughly over this plant. Okay, let's pass it around. And now my wife had pneumonia very recently, and her pneumonia did not respond to Zithromax, azithromycin. It was a resistant pneumonia. And so I said, honey, are you willing to try this Chumash remedy? So I had her vaporize over Yerba Santa, and the next day she was fine. The next day she was fine. Now in the old days, 30%, 1/3 of all children died of pneumonia before the age of 10. Did you know that? That's how important pneumonia was. And when the Spanish moved here to the state of California and enslaved the Indians and the missions, they noticed that the Chumash children didn't die from pneumonia the way the Spanish children died from pneumonia. So the Spanish actually learned how to use this plant from the Indians. And that's why it's called Yerba Santa, holy plant, saintly plant, the plant that saves our children from pneumonia. So Dr. Briggs learned how to use Yerba Santa to treat tuberculosis. In the old days, when you were diagnosed with tuberculosis, you went home and you said goodbye to your family because you were going to die. Period. It was like no hope. But Dr. Briggs was well known for curing people from tuberculosis. He didn't cure everybody, but he did cure some. And Cecilia, Garcia, and I actually gave a talk a couple years ago where a very old woman showed up, and one of her friends that she knew as a child had been cured of tuberculosis by Dr. Briggs. His tuberculosis clinic closed in the 1880s. And from 1880 to 1960, Yerba Santa was one of the things that we used to treat tuberculosis in the United States in hospitals and clinics. It was also used in Britain. And after 1960, there was a law that was passed that required that all medicines had to have proven efficacy in clinical trials. No one was willing to test this plant in clinical trials, so we stopped using it. We knew that it worked, we stopped using it. So today, as we stand here, the #1 pathogen-borne epidemic is AIDS. #3 is malaria. What is #2? Tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is killing almost 10 million people a year around the world, including here in the United States. Why is tuberculosis coming back? It's resistant to all of the drugs that we have against tuberculosis. We don't use Yerba Santa, why not? This is the third one right here, this one. You all see those little purple flowers and the green leaves? Who knows what it is?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, black sage, Salvia mellifera. Salvia means salvation, mellifera means dark colored. This is our dark colored salvation. I want you to rub your fingers on it, smell your fingers, get to know this plant. It's a sage, just like white sage, but white sage is a very different plant. This one is oily, and your fingers feel kind of oily as you rub it. So this is a good pain reliever. Now this plant, black sage, is not as powerful a pain reliever as sagebrush, but it's a very useful pain reliever. So what you would do is you would collect about this much of the plant. Okay, everybody got that amount? Put it in 2 quarts of water in a pan. I use a gourd because, I mean, it's more authentic Chumash. I have a big gourd. And I put it in there with 2 quarts of water, leave it in the sun, and 1 leaf of white sage. White sage is in everything. And you leave it in the sun for 2 or 3 hours until it turns a dark brown. Soak your feet in it. You just put your feet in there. And, you know, I'm a marathon runner. I ran the LA Marathon a couple weeks ago, my number 21 marathon. Guess what I'm putting my feet in? Well, first of all, I put that liniment, that sagebrush liniment on my legs. Oh, yeah. And I run the marathon with that sagebrush liniment on my legs. And then after the marathon, I soak in this stuff. Good pain reliever. Good for arthritis. It's milder than the sagebrush liniment. But this is another plant that we need to learn how to use from the Chumash. So all the diterpenoids and monoterpenoids in this plant, they cross the skin. They relieve pain by interacting with the pharmacy students. Are you listening? They interact with the transient receptor potential cation channels, and they interact with the with other receptors. What are they called? Not prostaglandin, but I've forgotten. Anyway, ask me later and I'll tell you. So there are two different kinds of receptors they interact with to relieve pain. And so this is another plant, safer than opioids, safer than NSAIDs, safer than Tylenol. And we need to learn how to use black sage. Plant it in your yard, use it. You want to, if you can get seawater, those of you who are in La Crescent, it's a long drive, I know, but seawater is best to make the sun tea of this plant. Okay? Other questions about black sage or Yerba Santa?
Is it also good for allergies or asthma?
Yes, this is good for asthma. Yerba Santa is good for asthma. Now be careful, those of you who have asthma, be careful when you use this plant for asthma to vaporize over it. Because if you make a tea of this plant and you're drinking the tea every day to treat your asthma, eventually there's a good chance you're going to become allergic to this plant. And we have had one guy in particular who was drinking it every day for his asthma said, oh man, it works so well for my asthma. 2 months later, he emailed me and said, I'm now allergic to the plant, can't use it anymore. So vaporize over it. You know, the Chinese use ginseng at this change of every season to help their bodies adapt to the seasons. You can use Yerba Santa the same way. You one leaf, mug of water, heat it up to it where it starts to boil and stop it. Mild tea. Then you drink that mild tea and it helps 4 nights in a row. At the change of seasons, it helps you adapt to the change in seasons. Now this plant, if you smell it, now you look at the leaves and you notice that this leaf is kind of hacked up. This is the best leaf right there. The bugs are telling you this is the best leaf. The bugs like it, this is the one to get. Here we go. Now, you've all smelled bay before, right? Now, California bay is more pungent than European bay, but it has very similar smell to it, and it's used for pain. When you go to the dentist, he has a little jar that he calls clove oil, and he takes a little stick and he puts it on your gum, and your gum turns numb very quickly. Same thing in here. It's called methyl-eugenol and eugenol. These are monoterpenoids, very powerful pain relievers. Much more potent than morphine. Okay, very powerful. So you can use it for pain relief, like if you have arthritis pain, put it in your tub, fill it with hot water, put a handful of these leaves in there and soak in it. You get that beautiful smell from the bay leaves, and you get the pain relief from the bay leaves also. Now, if you have migraine headaches, what you do is you take this leaf, and you notice that here's the tip of the leaf here, here's the stem of the leaf here, and you break it at the stem, which is not easy, but you do it anyway, until you break it, and now you get that amazing smell. Let's pass it around, but you take this leaf and you just stick it in your mouth, and you hold it in your mouth until your migraine headache is gone. That's all you do. It takes about 5 or 10 minutes. Now, not everybody who suffers from migraine headaches will have their headaches relieved by this plant. Every migraine sufferer is different. You know, some Imitrex works real well, others Imitrex doesn't do a thing. So migraine headaches are an experiment. You just have to experiment until you find something that works. So that's what we use bay for. And you can also drink it as a tea during the change of seasons, just like you use Yerba Santa if you want to. Any questions about bay?
I've got a neighbor who suffers from migraines. Would you use one leaf for each migraine?
One leaf
and
for each
don't
migraine.
Use it again.
Don't use it again.
Could you use it again for something else?
Make a tea from it.
Okay.
And the dry leaves are just as good as the fresh leaves for migraines.
It's the one you said is yucky for cooking, right?
You know, some people do cook with it. Cecilia Garcia does not recommend cooking with it. Some people do. Now, this thing, I don't see any seeds on it right now, but it does develop seeds. And the seeds are sort of a nut-like thing with a big, thick husk on it. You peel the husk off, and then you roast the seed. And you really have to roast them until they are cooked. And then you can eat them. Some people really like the flavor of the seeds of this tree. They're kind of buttery. Personally, I do not like them because it has this bay flavor that I just don't like it. So it's just my preference, that's all. But some people eat lots of the seeds of this tree.
I have a question.
Yeah.
We used it for sauerkraut.
Sauerkraut, yeah.
Sauerkraut.
Yeah,
just as a flavor thing.
European bay, not
That's
this
a different one, okay.
Yeah, this one is different. European bay, I've forgotten the name. This is Umbellularia californica. It's a different genus,
Okay.
but it has the same compounds, very similar compounds in it.
Okay.
This one is more powerful than the European
More
bay.
medicinal. Okay.
Does anyone know what these plants are?
Mugwort.
Mugwort. Mugwort.
Mugwort.
This is mugwort right here.
Coolest name ever.
Like a Harry Potter plant.
You're thinking of
I'm
Harry
thinking
Potter.
of the high school kids. I'm like, and at the end of the trail, there's mugwort.
That'll get them up.
Yeah.
So now there are 5 plants that occur all over the world. You've already seen one, which is the elderberry. This is another one. Mugwort occurs all over the world. Number 3 is chamomile. Number 4 is stinging nettles. And number 5 is, what am I thinking of? Anyway. No, there are 5 of them. Anyway, that our ancestors brought with them all over the world, wherever they went. They're found in Europe, Asia, Africa, North America, South America. They're found all over the world. And this plant here in California is called Artemisia Douglasiana. In Europe, it's called Artemisia vulgaris. In China, it's called Artemisia argyrii. They're the same plant. They're used similarly all over the world.
So people brought them?
Yeah, our ancestors brought them wherever they went. They must have been important for something. The reason that you're alive today is because our ancestors brought them with them wherever they went. That's how important they are. All right? And so this plant, mugwort, is called dream sage by the Chumash. So what you do is you grow it in your garden. You can buy it at Theodore Payne Foundation, which is what I did. And I grow it in my garden. I have a big stand of mugwort in my garden. So you take the stems of this plant, stems and leaves, and you put them under your pillow. And you sleep on your pillow, and it will help you dream at night. And this is very important, especially for cancer chemotherapy patients, because they don't dream. You know, they go home and they say, oh my God, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. Does that help anybody? If you go home and say, oh my God, I'm going to die, what's going to happen to you? You're going to die. That's called the nocebo effect. Nocebo. This is true. You can read papers on the nocebo effect. Oh my God, I'm going to die. Nocebo effect. I'm going to die. You will die. You know, if your doctor tells you, well, you know, we've tried 6 different anti-cancer drugs on you and we're at the end of our treatment, you just need to go home and die. You will go home and you will die. I didn't tell you to go home and die. Your doctor did. Okay? So now this plant, what you do is you put it under your pillow and it helps you dream at night. This is so important for cancer chemotherapy and other people who are just giving up in despair. Just being able to sleep and dream, and you can dream of something other than dying. Doesn't that sound like a good thing? I think so. You know, oh wow, wouldn't it be great to go to Tahiti? You know, I'd love to go to Austria and have Yacca torta. You know, dream about really good things. Okay? So that's why it's called dream sage. And when the leaves dry, you take the leaves and you put them in a sack and you put that sack under your pillow and just keep it under your pillow. It will help you dream.
Is there a scent that comes up from it? Or?
Yeah, it has a mild smell to it, and it's that fragrance that helps you dream. And so you should rub your fingers on the plant and get to know the smell. It has kind of a mild sage smell to it. In China, they use this plant for moxibustion. And so you smudge it for moxibustion, and you put it over like an acupuncture point, and you heat that acupuncture point with that mugwort cigar. That's called moxibustion in China. Now, what you're talking about could also be using white sage to smudge people and to bless them. Smudging with white sage is a very special privilege that only a few people have in every community. So when I go to Chumash powwow, there's always one person who is the smudger, and you go to him or her and you have them smudge you, which means they're blessing you, and the smoke takes your prayers to God. Okay, and so unless you are that person who has been trained and designated, and you are the one who prays for the people, you do not do that. Okay, now you can do it for your family in the privacy of your own yard. But you don't do it in public unless you are the designated smudger. Yes?
What about poison oaks and poison ivy?
Yeah, you can use mugwort for poison oak also. We passed a whole bunch of poison oak.
Up there. Can't miss the poison oak.
Yeah.
Right where those rocks are.
Oh, up there.
Evil plant. Right in front of you, about 10 yards. Where that lady is?
So poison oak, leaves of 3, let it be. Leaves of 3, let it be. Now, what you do if you get a poison oak rash and you want to treat it with mugwort, you take a couple of the leaves, put them in your hand, and you pee on it. And you take those pea-soaked leaves and you rub it on the rash, and it will help treat your rash.
But
this is when you already have the rash, or like if I touch it now and I know it's
if you touch the bush, then you can pre-treat also.
You need to wash your hands before you.
That's right.
So
your pee is a lot cleaner than you think. There's no bacteria in your pee. It just doesn't smell very good. So yes.
But how does it work then? Like, for example, if you buy mugwort soap, like, to get rid of poison ivy?
You can buy mugwort soap that's made in Europe, and people wash themselves with the mugwort soap, and that also can help against poison oak and poison ivy.
Oh, okay.
But it's far better to pee on.
Great.
When I took my wife and son to Hawaii, my son stepped on a sea urchin spine.
Ouch.
And it went right into his foot. And these two little Hawaiian girls, cute little Hawaiian girls, said, all you have to do is pee on it and that spine will come right out and the pain will be gone. And he said, I don't want to do that. And they said, well, you can live with your pain. It's up to you. Okay. So I think that's the end of our hike.